I disappeared without a trace after discovering my cheating wife went to a secret party with her lover. When she arrived home, she found only a letter on the living room table. "You lost everything. The house will be sold, and everything will come to me. You're on the street." I imagined her face when she read those words. The shock. The unbelief. Desperation mixed with regret as she looked around and realized that every corner of that house, every object that once seemed unshakable, was now part of a past that she herself destroyed. And in that moment, I felt nothing but cold relief, as if the weight of years of lies had finally slipped off my shoulders. But relief soon gave way to uneasiness. I wasn't finished. Not yet. I relived every detail of that damn night when I discovered everything. The phone vibrating in silence. A notification glowing on the screen. A short and casual message, but full of meaning, "I can't wait to see you today." The anxiety in her eyes as she fixed her hair in the mirror, changing her clothes 3 times before finally walking out the door without knowing I was watching her. She thought she was being careful, but her blind confidence disgusted me. Every step I took that night felt like a knife stuck deeper in my chest. And the worst thing was not the betrayal itself, but the ease with which she gave in, as if our story was nothing more than a disposable detail, an obstacle that she could ignore without guilt. I sat in the car parked across the street, watching the house lights go out. Minutes later, I saw the lover arrive. He got out of the car as if he already owned the place, confident, smiling. I wanted to get out of the car right then, rip it out of there and throw it on the sidewalk, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the desire to see her pay for what she did. Maybe I wanted a better plan, something that would really break her. So I waited. And as I waited, every minute fueled the anger that burned inside me. When she came home that night, I was no longer there. I left the letter folded on the table, along with the keys to the house she could no longer call home. I imagined her calling my name down the empty hallway, her voice turning into a muffled echo. I imagined the moment when she would realize what she had lost, not just the comforts of home, but the stability, the security, the trust of a man who gave her everything. But there was something else she didn't know. Something I had planned to be the final blow. As she read those harsh words in the letter, her lover was far away, on a plane to nowhere, taking every penny she had saved. The money she stole from our joint accounts. The savings we had saved over the years. Every penny she used to support that dirty relationship. She thought she was in control, that she could play with me and come out on top. But the tables turned, and now she was alone. Destroyed. And as I watched it all from afar, I wondered if there was any chance of regret. Whether she would truly understand what she had done or whether she would spend the rest of her life blaming the world for her choices. Part of me wanted her to learn, to look back and see every wrong step. But the other, darker part wanted her to never get up from the ground. I could still hear her voice in my head, the promises of eternal love, the vows exchanged at the altar. Empty words. Every memory became an open wound, every shared laugh turned into an echo of humiliation. And even with the distance between us, I knew this wasn't the end. There was something about her that I needed to understand. The reason. The justification she would create to try to clean up her image. I needed to hear this from her. But time passed, and the lack of answers left me with too many questions. Did she already know that everything would end like this? Did she, at some point, feel afraid of being found out, or did she just believe that I would be stupid enough to play the fool until the end? I wondered if, that night, as she laughed and drank with her lover, she thought of me for even a second. And now, I was ready to see the outcome. To face the consequences of the storm I caused. I knew she would try to find me, we would try to talk, but I also knew there was nothing left to save. I was already on another path, a path where broken promises had no place. I could see her, alone and helpless, trying to rebuild her life from the ashes of what she destroyed. I could imagine the sleepless nights, the tears shed as I stared at the phone waiting for a call that would never come. But deep down, what kept me awake was not her image. It was mine. The man I became after that betrayal. Because, as much as I wanted to believe that I would come out of this situation unscathed, something inside me was already broken. And I knew that as I looked to the future, there would always be a shadow of the past haunting me. But one thing was certain. She would pay. One way or another, she would pay. And I would be there to watch. In the end, there was only one question left: was she a victim of her own game or just a pawn in my revenge? Welcome to the channel where the truth about betrayal is exposed in a raw and intense way. Here, we do not support and will never accept any type of betrayal. Our stories are fictional, but they carry a powerful message: betrayal can destroy lives, trust and dreams. Get ready to dive into a shocking and exciting narrative. Now, sit back and be ready for a story you will never forget. Richard always believed that life was built on solid foundations. Hard work, honesty, and commitment. This is how he built his career as an architect and also his marriage to Emily. From the moment he met her, he knew he had found someone with whom he could share not only the good days, but also the challenges. Emily had a charming smile, the kind of smile that disarmed any resistance. She was intelligent, passionate about art and had a rare sensitivity for noticing details that went unnoticed by others. Richard fell in love with her ability to transform the ordinary into extraordinary. They got married after 2 years of dating, in an intimate ceremony in the garden of her parents' house. Richard still remembered the sparkle in Emily's eyes as she said her vows. He believed that moment symbolized the beginning of a perfect journey. And for a long time, that's exactly how he felt, happy and complete. Together, they built a comfortable life. They bought a spacious house in a quiet neighborhood, decorated by Emily with elegant furniture and carefully chosen pieces of art. Richard spent his days designing houses and buildings, while Emily devoted her time to painting and organizing local exhibitions. Their marriage seemed to be a perfect balance of stability and passion. Richard liked the predictability of routine. I liked knowing that I would come home and find Emily cooking dinner or sitting on the couch reading a book, her bare feet propped up on the coffee table. He liked the feeling of belonging, the comfort of knowing that someone was waiting for him. Emily, on the other hand, loved spontaneity. I liked planning last-minute trips, dragging Richard to exhibitions in other cities and surprising him with unexpected gifts. In the beginning, these differences only enriched the relationship. Richard admired Emily's lightness, while she found security in his seriousness. But over time, this dynamic began to change. Emily missed the excitement of the beginning of their relationship, while Richard settled more and more into routine. He believed he was building a future for both of them, but he didn't realize how much he was missing out on the present. Despite the small tensions, Richard never doubted Emily. I trusted her with my eyes closed. When she said she was going to an art gallery to discuss a new project, he would smile and encourage her. When she went out to meet friends, he was happy that she had someone to talk to. Richard believed that their love was enough to withstand time, monotony, and even occasional arguments. But sometimes Emily seemed distant. It wasn't something he could point to directly, a gesture or a word. It was more like a feeling that hung in the air. He wondered if he was just imagining things, if the routine of marriage had turned Emily into someone more reserved. Maybe it was just tiredness. She was always a sensitive woman, and the pressure to produce new works and keep her artistic career moving could be exhausting. Emily, in turn, also had her dilemmas. She loved Richard, but in quiet moments she wondered if she was living fully. Marriage had given her stability, but had it taken away part of who she was? She felt guilty for thinking that way, because she knew how hard Richard worked to give her everything he could. But amid the galleries, art talks, and dinners with friends, Emily began to feel like something was missing. She couldn't say exactly what, she just felt the emptiness growing. Even so, she tried to compensate for these feelings by dedicating herself to the relationship. I surprised Richard, planned trips and tried to rekindle the flame that I felt was fading. Richard, on the other hand, saw these gestures as proof of Emily's love and thought everything was fine. He didn't realize that, behind the smiles and displays of affection, there were doubts and insecurities growing inside her. Over the past few months, Emily had started going out more often. Richard didn't care. In fact, he even liked to see her happy and involved with her work. He knew that art was her passion, and he always supported her in everything. But on some nights, when Emily arrived late, Richard felt an inexplicable discomfort. He would quickly dismiss these thoughts, convincing himself that he was just tired or being paranoid. He refused to think that anything could be wrong. After all, Emily has always been transparent about her life. She talked about the events she attended, showed photos of the exhibitions and commented on the artists she worked with. Richard trusted her because he wanted to believe that her love was different, that it was stronger than the marriages he saw crumbling around him. The days passed, and Richard continued immersed in his work, leaving Emily to follow her own interests. Sometimes he wondered if he should do something different, maybe plan a romantic dinner or suggest a trip. But he always left it for later. I thought there was still time, that their love was solid enough to withstand any difficult phase. However, small details began to bother him. The way Emily checked her cell phone more frequently, the smiles she gave while answering messages, the quick phone calls that ended as soon as he entered the room. Richard tried to ignore it, telling himself he had no reason to doubt her. But deep down, something was beginning to stir inside him, a feeling that perhaps he didn't know Emily as well as he thought. He wanted to believe that it was all just a reflection of his own insecurity. After all, Emily has always loved him. She was always by his side, supporting his dreams and celebrating his achievements. She would have no reason to hide anything. But no matter how much he tried to push these thoughts away, they came back with more force every day. Emily, on the other hand, also felt the weight of what she was hiding. She knew she was playing with fire, that she was risking everything she had built with Richard. But at the same time, she felt alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. This duality consumed her. And while the two continued to dance on this tightrope, not knowing what the future held, something was about to happen. Something that would change everything. And when that happened, neither Richard nor Emily would be the same. Richard woke up that morning feeling something different. The house was too silent, as if it carried an invisible weight. Emily had already left, leaving only the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee. He stood in the kitchen for a few minutes, watching the soft light filter through the windows. He tried to shake off the uncomfortable feeling that had accompanied him for weeks, but it refused to go away. Something was wrong. Maybe it was just the accumulated tiredness or the monotony that had settled between them in the last few months. Or maybe it was something more. He remembered the last few weeks and the way Emily seemed more distracted, more absent. Her schedule had changed, cell phone messages became more frequent and romantic dinners, which used to happen effortlessly, now seemed like forced moments. Richard tried to justify all of this as a result of the work pressure, deadlines, and creative demands Emily faced. But as much as he tried to ignore it, there was something about his behavior that just didn't make sense. His uneasiness grew whenever he saw her overdressing for dates that previously required nothing more than casual clothes. The strong perfume, the dresses that rarely left the wardrobe and the smiles practiced before leaving the door. Richard noticed every detail, but refused to confront her. Maybe out of fear of the answer. Maybe because he still wanted to believe that their love was enough to withstand anything. That afternoon, while working on a project, Richard felt the sudden urge to surprise her. He decided to look for it at the gallery where it was supposed to be. He bought flowers on the way and felt a little nervous thinking about her reaction. I wanted to rekindle something, show that I was still willing to fight for them. But when he arrived at the gallery, he was greeted by a member of staff who looked at him with confusion before saying that Emily hadn't been there that day. Richard stood still for a moment, trying to process the words. He thanked him and hurried away, feeling his heart racing. In the car, he checked the GPS on Emily's cell phone, an app they used to share locations for safety. The marker showed her at an unknown address. He hesitated before heading there, but the need for answers spoke louder. The journey was marked by a mixture of anger and anxiety. Richard tried to imagine logical explanations for the situation, but each theory seemed weaker than the last. When he finally stopped in front of the address, he found an inconspicuous building, with closed curtains and few lights on. He waited in the car, watching the entrance carefully. With each passing minute, he felt more suffocated by uncertainty. When he saw Emily walk out the door, laughing alongside a man he had never seen before, time seemed to stop. The man touched her arm intimately, and Emily didn't move away. On the contrary, he smiled as if that gesture was something natural, something that had happened many times before. Richard felt his blood boil. His first instinct was to get out of the car and confront them right there, but something held him back. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was the need to see more, to be absolutely sure before acting. He followed them. He saw them enter a cozy restaurant, the kind of place where couples celebrated anniversaries and made promises of eternal love. Richard watched from a distance, fighting the pain that grew by the minute. He saw them laugh, toast and look at each other in a way he hadn't seen Emily look at in a long time. It was at that moment that reality hit him hard. There was no more room for doubt. When they left the restaurant, Richard continued to watch. Emily held the man's hand as they walked to the car. He watched as she leaned in to kiss him. It wasn't a quick or superficial kiss. It was the kind of kiss that carried passion, desire and intimacy. Richard felt his stomach turn. For a brief moment, I wanted to believe that I was having a nightmare, that this was nothing more than an illusion created by fear. But it wasn't. It was real. He returned home without knowing exactly how he got there. Every image from that night replayed in his mind like a looping movie. He felt the weight of betrayal in every fiber of his body. He sat on the couch, staring into space, trying to find a way to process what he had just seen. Everything they had built together seemed to crumble before him. Hours passed until Emily finally returned. She walked through the door as if nothing had happened, smiling when she saw him there. Richard watched her for a long moment, fighting the urge to confront her immediately. Instead, he decided to wait. I needed to know how far this would go, I needed to understand what motivated her to betray like this. In the following days, Richard began to observe Emily with a different eye. Every gesture, every word seemed loaded with hidden meanings. He followed her in silence, paying attention to every detail. And with each new sign, the pain deepened. He discovered messages on her cell phone, hotel reservations, and even gifts that were clearly not meant for him. But Richard also began planning. Pain gave way to anger, and with it came the need for revenge. He knew he needed to be careful. Emily couldn't suspect anything. As she continued to live her lie, he silently prepared his next move. When he finally decided to confront her, it wasn't with shouting or impulsive accusations. It was cold. He waited until she returned from another of her mysterious outings and left the letter on the table. He left the house without looking back, taking only what he needed. I knew this would be a night Emily would never forget. But as he drove, he felt that this was still not enough. Something inside him screamed for more. For justice. For a final blow that would show Emily the consequences of her choices. Richard knew that the real reckoning was yet to come. And when the time came, he would be ready to face whatever came next. Emily was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by open boxes and overturned drawers. The smell of burning paper still permeated his clothes, a suffocating reminder of the destruction he found when he returned home. His eyes scanned the remains scattered across the floor, torn photos, crumpled letters, small fragments of a life that now seemed distant. His hands shook as he held the letter Richard had left on the table, the words imprinted on his mind like an open wound. She lost everything. The house. The security. The husband. All that was left was emptiness and shame. But the worst was yet to come. The silence was broken only by the sound of his ragged breathing when the doorbell rang. Emily hesitated before opening the door, fearing it was Richard. But it was him. Her eyes met his, cold and distant, and the weight of guilt made her look away. He entered without asking permission, closing the door behind him with a slow, calculated movement. The tension in the air was suffocating. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. He didn't say anything, just watched her with a look that stripped her of all her defenses. When the silence finally broke, Richard's voice came low, but carried with a cutting weight. He asked how she had the courage. How she managed to smile at him, kiss him and at the same time lie in the arms of another man. Emily tried to respond, but the words jumbled up into incoherent excuses. Richard didn't want an apology. He wanted answers. And most of all, he wanted to see her fall apart the way he had fallen apart. The discussion began with direct accusations. Richard enumerated the moments when he became suspicious, the clues he ignored, the lies he accepted. Emily cried, begging for forgiveness, saying she didn't plan any of this, that it all happened too quickly. But Richard didn't believe a word of it. He wanted the truth. I wanted to know what else she was hiding. It was then that he dropped the bomb. With a sudden movement, he threw a thick envelope, marked with a bank seal, onto the table. Emily recognized him immediately. His hands went to his mouth, stifling a sob. He knew. Richard knew about the money. He knew about the transfers, the withdrawals, the hidden deposits. She tried to deny it, but he opened the envelope, scattering the bank statements on the table. Exorbitant figures. Money she embezzled over the months, hiding in a separate account. Richard continued speaking, his voice rising as he revealed what he had discovered. Emily had transferred not only her personal savings, but also part of the money from the sale of a property that Richard had inherited. She claimed that she would use it to invest in her artistic career, but the truth was different. She had given the money to her lover. He needed financial help to open a business, and Emily, blinded by passion, gave everything she had. She tried to explain that it was a moment of weakness, that she believed she was helping someone who made her feel alive again. But the words came out desperate and disjointed, and Richard didn't want to hear any more. He stood up, pointing to the boxes scattered across the floor, saying that was all that was left of her. That now she was alone, without a home, without money and, most importantly, without him. Emily collapsed to the floor, clutching the hem of his shirt, begging him to stay, to give him a chance to fix everything. But Richard walked away. He said there was nothing to be fixed. That the love he felt for her had died the night he saw her in the arms of another man. She tried to reach him once more, but he was already at the door, ready to leave. Before leaving, Richard turned around for the last time. He looked at Emily with a mixture of pain and contempt and asked how she could have been so naive. How could she trust someone who clearly used her? Emily was silent. There was no answer. And when Richard left, leaving her alone in the chaos he had caused, she felt the crushing weight of her choices. But the worst was yet to come. The next day, Emily tried to contact her lover. He called several times, but the calls went straight to voicemail. He went to his apartment, but the place was empty. The furniture was gone, and the curtains were open, revealing an abandoned space. She felt her stomach drop as she realized what had happened. He ran away. Took everything. Including money. Desperate, Emily began searching through his contacts, trying to find out where he had gone. But each call ended with vague answers or disconnected numbers. She felt despair take over. Not only had she lost Richard, but she had also been deceived and abandoned by someone she believed in. Over the next few days, Emily wandered the city looking for clues. He even went to the bank, trying to reverse the transfers, but it was too late. The money had already been withdrawn in another city, and there was no way to trace it. She returned to the house, or what was left of it, and sat on the floor, staring into space. Meanwhile, Richard tried to move on. He knew the pain wouldn't go away quickly, but he also knew he couldn't let what Emily did destroy him completely. He began to put his life back together, focusing on work and the future. But even in the moments he tried to forget, the image of Emily crying on the floor still haunted him. She, in turn, sank deeper and deeper. The nights were long and silent, and the messages she sent to her lover remained unanswered. Emily realized too late that she had been used, that she was just a piece in a game that she herself had helped build. And when she finally received an anonymous message confirming that her lover had fled the country, taking the money and leaving debts in her name, Emily felt that everything had come to an end. She was alone, ruined and with no one to blame but herself. Emily was sitting on the floor of the dark room, surrounded by scattered boxes and clothes. The heavy silence seemed to crush her as her fingers squeezed the cell phone that no longer had a battery. The pale reflection in the mirror showed an unrecognizable woman, messy hair, red eyes, and swelling on her face. The reality of the betrayal she had suffered from her lover still echoed in her mind like an endless nightmare. She tried to understand how everything fell apart so quickly, but each memory only tightened the lump in her throat. The sudden sound of knocking on the door broke the silence. Emily hesitated before standing up. His legs were weak, and fear took over. Who could it be? She opened the door slowly and found Richard standing there. His eyes were cold, but there was something different. He seemed calmer, but also more determined. She tried to speak, but he interrupted her with a look that made her freeze. He entered without asking permission, closing the door behind him. Emily pulled away, feeling her heart racing. Richard walked to the middle of the room, looking at the chaos around him. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. She didn't know what to say, so she just waited. He finally spoke, and his voice was low but sharp. "I should have known you would end up like this. Abandoned, alone, surrounded by the remains of what she destroyed. But even now, you still can't look me in the eye and tell the truth. You always wanted to play, Emily. The problem is that you never knew how to lose." Emily felt the words cut deeper than she expected. She tried to get closer, but Richard raised his hand, telling her to stop. "Don't try to touch me. You no longer have that right. I came here because I needed to see this. I needed to see you like this, without masks, without excuses. I wanted to see what you became after everything you did." She swallowed, feeling the weight of the words. He tried to argue, but his voice was shaky. "Richard, I was wrong. I know that. I got carried away. I believed him. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was lost." He laughed again, this time angrier. "Lost? Were you lost?" "No, Emily, you were calculating. Every step, every lie, every fake smile. You lost yourself when you chose to trust a stranger more than the man who had been by your side for years. You weren't lost. You knew exactly what you were doing." Emily fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to hurt you. I swear. I just wanted to feel alive again. You don't understand how suffocating it was, how I felt like I was disappearing." Richard watched her for a moment before crouching down in front of her. His eyes were filled with a mix of anger and hurt. "And you think I didn't feel that way? Do you think I didn't feel the weight of time? But I kept fighting. I continued to believe in us. You took the easy way out, Emily. He chose to betray me, steal from me and still play the victim." She tried to hold his hand, but Richard stood up, moving away. "Do you want me to feel sorry for you? Do you want me to believe that you were deceived? You destroyed me, Emily. And now it's destroyed too. But do you know what the worst part is? You didn't just lose the money. You lost your chance to be forgiven. He lost his chance to get back what he had. I tried to love you until the end. I tried to ignore the signs. But you made a point of throwing it all away. Emily stood up with difficulty, taking a deep breath. I know I made a mistake. I know I can't go back. But I need a chance to make things right. I need. Richard interrupted, his voice firm. Fix what? The money you gave him? The trust you destroyed? Do you think an apology will erase everything I saw? Everything I felt? I spent nights wondering how I could be so blind. I hated myself for not noticing. But now I see that the problem wasn't me. It was you. She took a step back, feeling the impact of the words. I loved you, Emily. I put you above everything. And you sold me. He sold our history, our life, our security for empty promises. And now you're here, waiting for me to save you. Emily sobbed, but Richard didn't back down. I won't save you. You need to understand this. I'm not here to rescue you, Emily. I'm here to see you face the consequences of your choices. She tried to speak, but he turned his back and started walking towards the door. Emily ran after him, holding his arm tightly. Richard, please. Don't go like that. I know I lost you, but I can't be alone. I can't. He let go, looking at her one last time. You're already alone, Emily. And it's not because I left you. It's because you chose it. Good luck. He left, leaving the door open. Emily fell to the ground, not having the strength to run after him. The echo of his footsteps coming down the stairs was the only thing that remained. Hours later, Emily was sitting on the floor again, hugging her knees. She felt the weight of silence suffocating her. He tried calling his lover once again, but the number was still out of service. She stared at the phone before throwing it against the wall. Richard, on the other hand, was driving down the road with no clear destination. He knew that conversation had been necessary, but that didn't make the pain any less. The love he felt for Emily was still there, buried beneath layers of anger and disappointment. But he knew that chapter needed to end. Emily was left alone in that empty house, staring at the bare walls and feeling the weight of every mistake she made. She knew that nothing would be the same again. And for the first time, he realized that perhaps he deserved every tear, every moment of despair. Because, in the end, she was the one who bet everything, and lost. Emily spent the next few days surrounded by suffocating silence, as if the world around her had lost all sound or movement. The walls of the empty house seemed to close in on her, echoing the solitary steps she took from one room to another, aimlessly. Each night, he lay on the couch with his body curled up, hugging a pillow as if it could fill the space left by Richard. The tears were drying on her face before she had the strength to wipe them away. The eyes stared at the dark ceiling, trying to find answers where there were only questions. Try as I might, I couldn't stop thinking about the moment he turned his back and left her there, as if she were nothing more than a stranger. The days seemed endless, but it was during the nights that the weight of guilt became unbearable. She turned over the sheets, remembering every word she had said and every lie she had told. She wondered what Richard was doing, if he had already moved on or if, like her, he still felt the emptiness growing. The thought that he could be with someone else gnawed at her, but Emily knew she had no right to be jealous. Not after all. I tried to push away the image of him with another woman, but the pain returned with force, mixed with a regret that burned like fire. In a desperate attempt to regain some control, Emily searched through her accounts, trying to find any clue that could lead her to her missing lover. Every screen in the bank showed the numbers reset to 0, as a cruel confirmation of the blow he had suffered. She returned to the building where the man lived, but no one could tell where he had gone. There was only an echo of laughter and empty promises that left her feeling sick. She hated herself for being so naive, for having traded years of love and stability for an empty dream. But what destroyed her most was the knowledge that Richard was right. She planned each lie, believing she could control everything. Attempts to contact him have repeatedly failed. Messages were not answered, calls went to voicemail. Emily thought about going to his work, but the fear of being rejected in front of her colleagues stopped her. Instead, she wrote letters she never sent, letters full of regret and apologies, trying to find words that made sense to someone who no longer believed in her. As the days dragged on, Emily began to realize that she had lost more than Richard and the money. He had lost the respect of everyone around him. The few friends who still spoke to her treated her with a mixture of pity and judgment, as if she were a cautionary tale. Loneliness became his only company, and shame became a constant weight on his shoulders. Richard, on the other hand, tried to move on, but found it difficult to erase the memories. He threw away all the photos and deleted old messages, but the image of Emily smiling at her lover still haunted him. Days at the office were filled with incessant work, but nights were filled with endless thoughts. He wondered if he had done the right thing, if he had been too harsh, but then he remembered the lies and the betrayal, and any doubts disappeared. Still, something bothered him. It wasn't anger. It was the feeling of emptiness. He went out drinking on a cold night, trying to shake off the thoughts. He sat at the counter of an unfamiliar bar, surrounded by strangers. He ordered a strong dose and tried not to think about Emily. But it was when he looked to the side and saw a couple exchanging complicit smiles that the memory came back with full force. He picked up the phone, almost called her, but decided against it at the last second. Instead, he left his cell phone on the counter and ordered another drink. Emily, that same night, was looking at her phone, waiting for a call that never came. She thought about going to her parents' house, but she knew she would have to explain everything. I wasn't ready to face any more trials. Instead, he put on a coat and went out to walk the empty streets. The biting cold felt like a necessary punishment, something that kept her awake as she tried to process everything she had lost. On impulse, he picked up the phone and called Richard. His heart raced when he heard the ringtone. But the call was rejected. She tried again, and once again, was ignored. The final rejection was like a blow to the gut. She felt broken in a way she had never felt before. He sat down on a bench and cried, not caring who might see. Richard saw the calls but didn't answer. He stared at his phone as her name flashed on the screen. He wanted to hear her voice, wanted to scream, ask why. But he knew he couldn't. Answering would mean opening a door he had decided to close. He left his cell phone aside and left the bar, taking a deep breath to clear his thoughts. Over the next few days, Emily sank deeper into sadness. He lost count of the hours, the days. Time seemed to not advance. She began to wonder if there was any chance of redemption, if there was still a way to rebuild something from what she destroyed. But messages and calls remained unanswered. She knew time was against her. Richard, on the other hand, began to feel something different. It was no longer anger, but a kind of emptiness that wouldn't go away. He began to wonder if there was anything left to be said, something that needed closure. He wanted answers, but he also feared hearing them. He thought about looking for her, but hesitated. Pride stopped him. Their lives seemed to spin in circles, trapped in a cycle of regret and pain. Emily, alone in that house that now felt like a tomb, and Richard, trying to fill the void with work and distractions that didn't last. But there was something about them that still connected them. Something unresolved. Something that needed to be faced before they could move forward, whether together or apart. Emily finally gathered her courage and went to Richard's office. She waited outside, nervous, with her hands shaking. When he left, their eyes met, and time seemed to stop. Richard stood still, surprised to see her there. She tried to speak, but he interrupted her with a look that asked for silence. He walked towards her slowly, and Emily felt her heart beat faster. The conversation that would follow would define everything. And at that moment, they both knew there was no more room for lies. Richard remained still for a few seconds, staring at Emily before him. She looked smaller, fragile, with red eyes and trembling hands. He took a deep breath, fighting the mix of feelings that overwhelmed him. Part of him wanted to turn his back and walk away, but the other part, the one that still carried the weight of the love he once felt, prevented him from taking that step. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but he raised his hand, asking for silence. Her gaze begged for a chance, but Richard knew that any word spoken at that moment could break the fragile control he had over himself. She finally found the courage to speak, and the words came out in a broken whisper. He apologized, said he knew nothing he said would change the past, but that he needed him to know that he loved him. Richard laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty hallway. Love. That word seemed like a joke now. He asked if she knew the real meaning of the word, if she understood the weight that came with promises made and broken. Emily tried to argue, saying that she made mistakes, but that she was willing to pay for them, to humiliate herself if necessary. Richard crossed his arms and waited for her to finish. When silence finally fell between them, he looked into her eyes and told her that love wasn't just about happy times, but about resilience in difficult times. He said that love could not survive betrayal, lies, the destruction of trust. Emily tried to hold his hand, but he pulled away, as if her touch burned him. He asked her what she expected from him, if she thought an apology would be enough to erase everything. She said no, but that she needed to try. He then said that he was moving on, that he had already started the process of selling the house and dividing the assets, but that there was nothing more to divide between them beyond that. Emily collapsed to the floor, crying uncontrollably. Richard stood still, watching her, but not moving to comfort her. He knew he needed to leave before his own pain overcame him again. In the days that followed, Emily tried to rebuild the pieces of her life, but the void continued to grow. She sold what little furniture she had left and moved into a small rented apartment. She tried to return to painting, but the colors that used to fill her with inspiration now seemed faded and lifeless. She sought therapy, trying to deal with the guilt and shame she felt, but nothing seemed to ease the burden. Richard, on the other hand, began to focus more on his work and slowly regained confidence in himself. He met new people, went out to dinners and tried to leave the past behind. But the nights were still difficult. The silence of the empty house constantly reminded him of what he had lost, and he fought the urge to take it back. It was on one of these nights, while walking through the park, that he met Julia. She was sitting on a bench, reading a book, and he felt something different when he saw her. A calm, a comfort that I hadn't felt in a long time. They started talking, and over time, that connection turned into something more. Julia was the opposite of Emily, stable, sincere and direct. She didn't play games and had no secrets. As Richard moved forward in his new life, Emily sank deeper and deeper. She discovered that her lover had been arrested in another country for fraud and would likely spend years in prison. He tried to use it as a way to find some justice, but all he felt was an even greater emptiness. She realized that it wasn't just the money or the lost relationship that destroyed her, but the fact that she betrayed the only person who really cared about her. The pain became unbearable when he received the divorce papers. Richard's name was there, cold and formal, cutting off any hope of reconciliation. She signed the documents with shaking hands and sent them back, feeling like she was burying the last remnants of what they once had. After that, Emily disappeared. He stopped answering messages, stopped going to the places he used to go. Richard learned from mutual acquaintances that Emily had left town and moved to a smaller place where no one knew her. He thought about looking for her, about finding out how she was, but decided it was better to leave the past behind. Julia brought him a new perspective on the future, and he didn't want to put that at risk. Years later, while packing boxes in his new home with Julia, Richard found an old photo of Emily. For a brief moment, He felt a tightness in his chest, but then he put the photo back in the box and continued what he was doing. He knew that part of his life was over, but he also knew that the scars would remain forever. Emily, on the other hand, was never able to fully recover. She tried to rebuild her life, but the choices she made continued to haunt her. The lost money, the friends who abandoned her, the destroyed reputation. She lived for years in silence, carrying the weight of the mistakes she made. She never tried to contact Richard again, knowing that he deserved to move on without the shadows of the past. And so, their story ended, not with a reunion or redemption, but with consequences that shaped the rest of their lives. Richard found a new chance at happiness, while Emily was forced to face the reflection of her choices for the rest of her days. Now that you've come this far, we want to know your opinion. What did you think of this story? Comment below and share your thoughts on what happened to the characters. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Remember, this channel does not support cheating of any kind. Betrayal destroys lives and leaves scars that not even time can erase. Thanks for following us and see you in the next story.